so I was very interested to see the similarities. There's not much. I give it... Hello my sweet angels, it's your girl Jay, and today I'm here with my March wrap up for 2025. I read a total of 13 books this month, which I am honestly kind of shocked that I read this much because March has been a doozy for me, I'm not gonna lie. My boyfriend and I bought a house together, so that took up the majority of our March, doing all the things that come along with purchasing your first house. Let me tell you, it's a lot, and I was very stressed this month. And then I also went permanent in my full-time job, so I now officially don't have to worry about whether or not I'm going to make enough money to own said house that I just bought. But I'm gonna stop yapping now, so without further ado, let us get started. The first book I read was Wicked Darlings by Jordan Taylor, and I gave this one a 3.5 out of 5 stars. This one follows an aspiring journalist named Noah. She has always felt like she is compared to her older sister Leah. When Leah comes home for the summer with an internship to a New York newspaper, Noah is very annoyed because that has always been her dream. Then Leah dies, and Noah secretly feels relief because now the spotlight can be on her. But then Noah discovers that her sister's death may have a little bit more to it than what she was originally told, so she decides that she is going to investigate on her own to find out what actually happened to her sister. She becomes entangled in the high society of Manhattan, and she uncovers a little bit of a scandal. This was a fun thriller with a mystery at the heart of it. There were some twists and turns that were quite obvious, but I did not see the ending coming. It definitely went in a direction that I did not see coming, so that was a bonus. I personally really like books with mixed media, so I really enjoyed the text messages, journal entries, and interview transcripts in this. I was not the biggest fan of Noah in the beginning, but she did definitely grow on me by the end of the story. I do think that she went through some pretty good character development by the end of the story, and it made me understand the relationship that she had with her sister a little bit more. The Avalons were definitely the most intriguing part of the story for me, and I wanted to know more about them. Overall, it is a very quick read. I read it in one sitting because I wanted to know what was going to happen in the end. I gave it a 3.5 out of 5 stars. Next up, I read Solace. This is by Paola Mendoza and Abby Sher. I gave this one a 3 out of 5 stars. This takes place in 2033, and the government of the new American Republic has begun hunting immigrants and putting them into isolation camps against their will. A rebellion group based out of California is fighting against this government to free the people of these camps, and it's basically the story of that. So I found out after I read this that this is a companion novel to Sanctuary by the same authors. I did not know that going into it, so maybe that's why I wasn't super invested in this book, because I didn't have the background story or the knowledge about these characters. I was also not a fan of the ending. It just felt like everything was resolved very quickly and it wasn't really satisfying to me, so I gave it a 3 out of 5 stars. It was not the book for me. Next up, I read Something in the Walls by Daisy Pierce, and this one I gave a 3 out of 5 stars as well. This one follows Mina, who is a newly licensed child psychologist. The only issue is that she needs real life experience to get any jobs. While attending a bereavement group for the death of her brother, she is approached by a journalist called Sam Hunt. He brings her to a small town where 13-year-old Alice Weber is exhibiting some strange behaviors. As Mina spends more time with Alice, she claims that she is being haunted by a witch. I really wanted to like this, but I was bored through the majority of the story. I did become very invested within the last 100 pages when things actually started to happen in the book, but by then I didn't really care. There were some creepy scenes, which is why I continued reading the story, but I didn't really feel connected to any of these characters, so I felt that the story was dragging because of this. I also didn't understand why there was so much talk about Mina and her fiance, because I didn't really see the relevance. He wasn't really part of the story, so why keep mentioning him? The book definitely had a lot of potential for me, but it just fell flat, so I gave it a 3 out of 5 stars. Next up, I read X Marks the Spot by Gloria Chow, and I gave this one a a 3.5 out of 5 stars. This follows a girl named Gemma, and at her graduation, she is informed by a lawyer that her grandfather has passed away and he has left her an inheritance. She must solve a string of puzzles in order to get this inheritance, but the problem is she needs to travel to Taiwan to do so. Gemma and her mother struggle with money, and with the tuition for college looming over her head, she decides that this inheritance may be the answer to all of her problems. When her mother refuses to pay for the trip, she must turn to Xander, who is her ex-boyfriend and also the leader of TARP, which is a student organization that is funding a trip to Taiwan. And they just so happen to have one spot that has just opened. This was a fun romance. I don't think that it is anything that will stick in my head for too long, but I did have fun while it lasted. Gemma and Xander had a lot of history with one another, but their families were also very deeply entwined with one another. I did like that they had to work together in order to solve the puzzles that Gemma's grandfather left for her. I also really liked that Gemma was able to learn more about herself and her culture on this trip. I also really loved all the talk about the food. It sounds so delicious and I really want to go to Taiwan just to eat the food now. I will say that the romance was very slow burn, and I wouldn't classify it as a very strong enemies to lovers. I think that it was very strong on Gemma's side, but Xander didn't necessarily feel the same way towards her, so it was a little weird. But like I said, I did like when they started to work together, and they definitely did have chemistry with one another after they stopped bickering. But overall, it was fun, nothing incredible. So I gave it a 3.5 out of 5 stars. The next two books that I have are part of the same duology, so I'm going to talk about them together so I don't spoil the second book for you guys. But the first book is Threads That Bind. The second book is Hearts That Cut. These are both by Kika Hatsopoulou. I always say that name wrong. I don't know how to do it. I'm sorry. But this one I gave a 4.5 out of 5 stars to. This was a reread for me. The entire duology follows the Aura sisters. They are aura bound, which means that they are the descendants of the Fates. Io is the youngest and she is a cutter, and this means that she is able to cut the threads that people have. Her older sister Tyas has the ability to weave threads, and her middle sister Ava has the ability to draw threads. Io uses her abilities during her private investigation business, but one day on the job it ends with a wraith murdering somebody. That same night, her path crosses with Ede, who is close with Bianca, who is the queen of the mobs. Io discovers that her fate thread connects her to Ede, but she does not want to tell him. She then begins to work with Ede to solve the mystery behind the Wraith's wandering town. Sounds very confusing, but once you read it, it does make a lot of sense. Like I said, this was a reread for me because I wanted to jump straight into the second book, so I understood what was happening. This second time around, I still really enjoyed the complicated relationships between Io and her sisters. I also still really liked Bianca in this. I think that she is such a badass character, and she was a big part of the second book. So if you read this and you really like Bianca, pick up the second book because she kicks ass in it. The only thing going into this book from the first time I read it that I remembered was the cliffhanger, and let me tell ya, it's a cliffhanger. So if you read this, I definitely recommend jumping straight into the second book. I only ended up giving this one a 3.5 out of 5 stars. I definitely recommend the first book more than this one, but it was still a really fun time. It picks up immediately where the first book leaves you. And like I said, there is more of a focus on Bianca in this one, which I loved. She is honestly just such an interesting character. I would love having a spin-off series based off of like her origin story, or like even where she is now. Honestly, I would read it. I did like the romance between Ede and Io. I think that it developed really well in this book. We also learn a lot more about the powers that people have in this book, and I found that part very interesting. But I do think that the story dragged quite a bit in the middle, which is why I lowered my rating to 3.5. I think that the story would have definitely benefited if we got multiple point of views. If we were able to hear from Bianca, all three of the Aura sisters, and Ede, I think that it would have really enhanced the story for me, but I digress. It was still a lot of fun. 3.5 out of 5 stars. Next up, I was a little bit disappointed by this one, which is really upsetting to say, but it is 99% Mine by Sally Thorne. I loved The Hating Game when I read it. 5 out of 5 stars. This one, 2 out of 5 stars. This one follows Darcy Bennett. She she has a twin brother named Jamie who she doesn't really talk to anymore. They have inherited their late grandmother's cottage, and so they decide that they are going to renovate in order to sell. They enlist the help of Tom Valeska, who is their childhood friend, in order to be the head renovator of this project. Tom has always been off limits to Darcy since he is their childhood friends and brother's best friend, but things take a little turn when she sees him once again. Like I said, I don't know if my expectations were too high because of the hating games. I was really not a fan of Darcy right from the first chapter. She just rubbed me the wrong way. She is definitely an unlikable character and she is very, very hard to root for. She is just so mean, and there wasn't really a reason for why she was so mean. She was also incredibly jealous, and some of the behavior that she was exhibiting I just could not get behind. I liked Tom for the most part, but I didn't fully understand why he felt so indebted towards the Barrett siblings. I think that the story would have benefited a lot more if there were more flashbacks from when they were children to kind of understand the dynamics between the three of them a little bit better. Jamie also just kind of sucked, to be honest. All three of the characters just weren't great for me. But I do think that the sexual tension and the sex scenes between them were well done, so 2 out of 5 stars. Next up, I read Needy Little Things by Chanel Desamours, and I give this one a 4 out of 5 stars. This one follows Soraya Lee Bryant, and she has the ability to hear the needs of others. She spends the majority of her day trying to fulfill the needs of others to stop the voices in her head, while also trying to care for her ill little brother and depressed mother. Years ago, Tessa, her best friend Malcolm's twin sister, went missing. So when her best friend Deja also goes missing, she decides to use her powers in the hopes of gaining a little bit of extra cash in order to find her friend. I think that the author did a really great job of blending the social commentary with the mystery elements along with the magical realism in this book. This was definitely a slow burn mystery, but I really like the overall message of the story. It tackles the topic of the unequal treatment of minority groups in missing person cases. I listened to this one on audiobook, and I think that the narrator did an incredible job of bringing Soraya to life. I really enjoyed her as a main character. I was so intrigued by her powers. It almost felt like her power was an analogy for OCD, with the constant compulsion of needing to help other people in order to stop the intrusive thoughts. But I could also be very wrong by that. I do think that the topic of mental health, especially with her mother's depression, was incredibly done. The ending was also really great. It took a turn that I did not see coming. It almost felt like we were left on a cliffhanger, so I'm hoping that there is another story to this because I would love to see Soraya and her powers again. Overall, I really like this. I give it a 4 out of 5 stars. Next up was the most disappointing book that I read this month, and that is Wicked. This is by Gregory Maguire. I really love the musical, and I really love The Wizard of Oz, and I just watched the Wicked movie for the second time, so I was very interested to see the similarities. There's not much. I gave this a 1.5 out of 5 stars. Like I said, I really did want to like it, but it was a hard read. It is the story of Elphaba. Everybody knows Elphaba is the green-skinned little girl who becomes the Wicked Witch of the West. I just found this to be so incredibly dense and boring. I am clearly not the target audience for this book because I was so confused for the majority of it. I think I'm just too dumb for this book. I wish things were explained more. I had no idea what was going on. I also thought that the book was so freaking long. It felt like it dragged on for 6 years. Literally none of the characters were likable either, which made it very hard for me to want to keep reading. If you are going into this thinking that it is going to be like Wicked the movie, it's not. So yeah, 1.5 out of 5 stars. It was not for me. Next up, I read Looking for Smoke by K.A. Coppell. This book I gave a 3.75 stars, which is the first 0.75 I've ever given in my entire life, but it was just not quite a 4 for me, but it was definitely higher than a 3.5. This takes place during the annual Indian Day celebration on the Blackfeet Reservation, and it follows a group of teenagers who become suspects in a murder investigation. This is a very slow burn mystery, and I really did enjoy it. There are a lot of characters to keep track of, but I thought they were all very interesting and complex. I was very intrigued with the relationships that they all had with one another, and I thought they were all very multi-layered. The book focuses very heavily on the very real issue of missing and murdered Indigenous women, and I think that it did it in a very respectful way. I also thought that the addition of the podcast was very interesting. The mystery kept me guessing the entire time, and that ending was definitely not what I expected, but I really enjoyed it. This did not feel like the author's debut novel, and I am definitely interested in picking up more from them when it becomes available. 3.75 stars for me. Next up, I read Disclaimer by Renee Knight, and I gave this one a 3 out of 5 stars. This one follows Catherine, who discovers a new mystery thriller novel. The book threatens to expose a secret that she thought she buried in her past a long time ago, and it's kind of the story of that. This was a very interesting concept. I really liked the book inside of the book. The book is told in dual point of view, and I do think that that helped build the tension of the story. The book is also told in present day along with a few flashbacks from Catherine's past. I was definitely invested in finding out what the big secret was and how it was going to play out. And I did like the story for the most part, but I do think that it dragged quite a bit in the middle, so I only gave it a 3 out of 5 stars. Next up, I read The Loss of the Burying Ground. This is by J. Anderson Coates, and I gave this one a 3.5 out of 5 stars. The Burying Ground is a ship that has 2 opposing sides of a war on board, but then it goes down at sea. There are only 2 known survivors of the shipwreck, and they have been washed up on an island. Cora is a Duran. She has been trained since childhood for the war, and Vivian, who is the Araminithian princess's maid. At first, they don't know either one of them is on the island, but when they meet, they must work together in order to escape the pirates also on the island. I enjoyed this a lot more than I initially thought I would. I really liked how it was told in dual point of view between Cora and Vivian. It really helped see the way that both sides were brainwashed by their perspective. There is also a third mystery point of view, which I thought really enhanced the story. I definitely enjoyed the time that they spent on the island more than once they were off the island, but it was still an enjoyable story overall, and I gave it a 3.5 out of 5 stars. And then the final book that I read is Swear on This Life by Renee Carlino, and I gave this one a 3.5 out of 5 stars as well. This book follows Emmeline. She picks up a book called All the Roads Between by Jay Colby. She quickly realizes that the story is actually the story of her childhood, and Jay Colby is her first love, Jace. This is another one that is a book inside of a book, which I find very funny that I ended up reading 2 books with that premise. I was actually more invested in All the Roads Between's chapters when we got to read the book rather than Emmeline's actual life. I felt way more connected to Emerson and Jackson in All the Roads Between rather than Emmeline and Jace in the real world. The abusive relationship between Emerson and her father in the book was so heartbreaking. I disliked both adult characters in this book. I was not a fan of Jace. I think that he was a little bit of a jerk, to be honest. I personally would be really angry if somebody took the story of my childhood and started profiting off of it, especially if it was very traumatic. I also didn't really understand Emmeline and her boyfriend Trevor's relationship because it was clearly like not a good relationship at all, but she stayed in it for so long. And it was weird because they literally were both so unhappy, so what is the point? I would be interested in reading more from this author because I do really enjoy their writing style, so I will keep my eyes peeled for more. But yeah, I give it a 3.5 out of 5 stars. Alright everybody, so those were the 13 books that I read for the month of March 2025. Let me know down below if you have read any of these books and what you thought of them, and I will see you all in my next video. Goodbye!